becoming astute to the fact that some of these people don't want him to succeed in this message. Some of the Jews would tell him, Assalamu alaikum. Instead of Assalamu alaikum, peace be, they would say Assalamu alaikum, which is like saying poison, be unto you. So as we used to say growing up, those are fighting words. You don't say that to somebody. You don't, that's like, basically wishing them to die. So these little stories that we have, you can start to see some of the agitation. But the real agitation at this period between Badr and Uhud is the story of Banu Qaynuqa. Banu Qaynuqa was one of the larger Jewish tribes, and they were in Medina, whereas a lot of the other Jewish tribes were outside of Medina. And if you remember when we talked about the constitution of Medina, I talked about the borders. So when the Prophet ﷺ defined Medina as constituting all of these tribes, Jewish tribes that is, with the Muslim tribes and Medina, he also defined the borders. So let's say downtown and suburbs or something like that, just to make it simple. But this was a tribe that was in Medina. They were all metal workers, so they all had they were the people, blacksmiths and etc. They were making steel, they were making shields, swords. They had enough weapons to arm 700 of their own people. So this is like a militia that's larger than the Muslim army itself. Badr, we talked about 300. The Banu Salim we talked about just a few minutes ago was 200. We're talking about very few people. These had 700 fighters, armed and ready. Plus, the collusion with Quraysh began at this point, at this time. But what was the hair that broke the camel's back? Is that there was a Muslim woman who came to the Banu Qaynuqa part of town and she was doing business. And her face was covered. She was wearing niqab. And the man was kind of like insulting her. He's like, let me see what you look like, trying to grab her, the veil to see, which, you don't do. That's very offensive. So he steps on her garment. So when she gets up to go away, her garment falls off of her. And she's like half naked, essentially, which is very, very embarrassing. And everyone's laughing at her. And then there's a Muslim guy that sees this, and he comes to her defense, and he kills this Jewish guy. So there you go. That's, a bad situation gone worse. Now things are really, we're talking about 700 fighters and arms, etc. That's a lot of force. This leads to a 15-day siege of Banu Qaynuqa that takes place in the 15th of Shawwal in the second year of the Hijrah. Banu Qaynuqa, they were aggressed against. This man shouldn't have been killed. That was wrong. But there's a larger issue that the details of this story is that previously they were intimating to the Prophet ﷺ their aggressive stance against the people of Medina. And remember that there is a constitution, there is a document that all of these tribes signed that talked about equal rights and responsibilities. And for them to have this passive-aggressive posture and to arm themselves, this represents a security threat for the people of Medina. The issue of the woman and the man in the marketplace, this is just the hair that breaks the camel back. So I don't want people to think that that's the story. So why did the Prophet siege these people over this incident if the Jews were treated wrongly, etc.? It's more than that. That's why I said it's the hair that breaks the camel's back. Anyway, Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul, who we talked about earlier, who is the leader of the Munafiqun. Before Badr, he didn't declare his Islam. After Badr, this is when his hypocrisy begins. So he says publicly he's a Muslim, but we know he's not a Muslim. So he goes to the siege with the Prophet ﷺ. He's begging the Prophet ﷺ. He's begging the Prophet to leave Banu Qaynuqa. Just leave them alone. They're my people. I'm related to them. I've trade with them, this and that. And the Prophet ﷺ, he keeps like looking away. And then finally he says, okay, I'll leave them to you. We won't take revenge, but they have to leave. They have to leave their weapons and leave. And the majority of the tribe of Banu Qaynuqa, they leave and they go north towards the Levant. And very few of them stay behind. And this is like a court judge decision that the Prophet ﷺ allows essentially Abdullah bin Ubay bin Salul to intercede on their behalf. So these are not things that are set in stone in the Sharia. but are within the purview of the ruler, are within the purview of the judge, etc. What we call siyasa shara'i. The second of Dhul Hijjah, the second in year 2 of the Hijrah, this is the battle of Al-Suwayq. Now Abu Sufyan is in charge of Quraysh. He wants to take revenge on the people of Medina, so he secretly comes to Medina one night and he starts meeting with some of the Jewish leaders that he knows are against the Prophet ﷺ. They kind of give him some information. He burns some property and some livestock. The Prophet ﷺ sends people after him. They're not able to capture him. So that's like this excursion, we should say, not battle. Also in the month of Dhul Hijjah, in the second year of the Hijrah, this is the marriage of Sayyidah Fatima to Imam Ali, alayhim as-salam. So just I highlight that this is when this takes place. She's coming of age, and Imam Ali marries her. And we know that they lived next to the Prophet ﷺ, and they had very meager means. And this was this is on purpose, that the daughter of the Prophet ﷺ and his son-in-law, his cousin as well, Imam Ali, they had meager means, right? This is a message for all of us that are looking to get married, right? Having the 5-day wedding on the elephant, the 15 outfits for the wedding, right? I'm not mentioning any names. I'm saying, guys, people ask me, what is a bid'ah? Honestly, that's a bid'ah. That's a problem. There's a problem with that. In some countries, it's so bad that people take out loans, personal loans, to get married. And what do they spend the loan on, the money on? They spend it on bling. How can my daughter have a house, an apartment that has less than 6 flat screen TVs? Honestly, what's wrong with watching on your phone? It's just the screen is just as good, right? What's wrong with that? I need 6 flat screen TVs. Why do I need, all of the linens that will last until the day I die? I'm really happy with just washing the sheet and putting it back on the bed. Really, we have to think like that. If the daughter of the greatest creation, the greatest man who's ever lived and ever will live, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, got married with almost nothing, then there's no reason that I should expect my daughter will have more than that. What I care about is she marrying somebody like Imam Ali? And if you have a son, is he marrying someone like, say, the Fatima? That's what matters. Honestly, seriously, the stuff doesn't matter. Stuff comes and goes all the time. And if you've lived long enough, you will know that. Stuff comes and goes all the time. And people have a healthier perspective. And a lot of times people that have that perspective are not even religious, but that they understand that things are fleeting. Ideas matter, character matters. That's the stuff that doesn't go away. That's the stuff that lasts. But you can't control, your income and all the degrees and acronyms that you want and your name. But, I remember when I left medical school and I was forced politely by my parents to pursue the PhD, I remember people were saying, PhD, poor hungry doctor, MD, money doctor, things like that. Nothing said. A tangent, just putting it out there. Muharram of the 3rd year of the Hijrah is the battle of Dhul Amr. Again, intelligence reports to the Prophet ﷺ that there are neighboring tribes that have raised arms, are marching. The Prophet ﷺ went out himself with 450 of his men. On the way, they came from the tribe of Banu Tha'liba. That was the tribe that the Prophet ﷺ heard was trying to attack them. He becomes Muslim, and then he guides the Muslims to the enemy. Enemy is scared, they retreat, but this time the Prophet ﷺ camped out there for the entire month of Safar to show the force, to show the neighboring tribes that they're not going anywhere, that they're strong, etc. And it's normal at this time that you would go somewhere and spend a few days. Like when you read that the Prophet ﷺ finished the Battle of Badr and waited 3 days to get somewhere, and the type of supply project that's taking place in Jordan. And they are actually looking at the seerah from this point of view. They're trying to calculate what would be the average Fath of Mecca. taking into consideration the things that I just mentioned, trying to put actual dates. Okay, they went to the Battle of Badr, we read in the Seerah, but how long did that take? What time did they leave Medina? So how many hours or how many days did it take to get there? To make us understand that sometimes, camping out somewhere for a month, that's normal. That's not like abnormal. Anyway, just putting that out there. The next major issue is the death of Ka'b ibn al-Ashraf, who was also mega Islam hater, enemy of the state, also happens to be from a Jewish tribe. He was very handsome, very well known, and a poet. And when you read in the Seerah that somebody's a poet, that's like today somebody owning a news station, or somebody owning a newspaper, or somebody having like okay, so I don't want to think, he's a poet, like, he could rhyme. No, that's not what, it's not like a hip hop artist. It's like media. This was the way things were communicated. It was in the Arabian Peninsula, it was communicated in poetry. So what he does is he goes to Mecca and he starts issuing his editorial comments, i.e. his poems, cursing the Prophet and cursing the Muslims, praising the people of Quraysh, praising the dead, the deceased of Quraysh in the Battle of Badr. So the people of Quraysh, they come to him like, what's up, what are you doing? And he basically pledges his allegiance to the people of Quraysh against the Prophet ﷺ. Okay, remember the constitution of Medina. So this is a violation of that. This is against that. Okay, so everything that will follow, you won't be able to make sense of it if you don't remember that he pledges his allegiance to an enemy state at a time of war against the Prophet ﷺ. He returns to the Medina and he does the same thing. He starts cursing the Sahaba, cursing the Prophet ﷺ with his poetry, etc. So the Prophet ﷺ says, who's going to take care of Ka'b for me? He has insulted Allah and his Prophet ﷺ. So Muhammad ibn Musalliman said, I will kill him. And elaborate story, I don't want to get into details because of the interest of time. He does this and he is assassinated, or he is killed. So this is a major part of what happens in between Badr and Uhud. In Rabi al-Akhir of the 3rd year of the Hijrah is the excursion of Bahran. The Prophet ﷺ took 300 men. There was no fighting, and this lasted about a month. And then the last thing we need to discuss before the Battle of Badr is the Battle of Uhud rather, is the last main military excursion that takes place in Jamad al-Akhir in the 3rd year of the Hijrah. This was led by Zayd ibn Haritha. Quraysh wanted to go north to trade, but wanted to find a different pathway rather than the pathway that went near Medina. So they wanted to find an eastern pathway. So they said, okay, we'll just do that. We'll find a new pathway, maybe we don't even need to worry about this problem. One of the early companions, his name was Sulayt ibn Nu'man. It's a funny story. Before the prohibition of alcohol, so he's out drinking with his buddy. And his buddy was a Qurayshi who was not a Muslim. So they get drunk. So the Qurayshi gets so drunk that he tells the companion about this new pathway. But Sulayt is not as drunk. So he said, this is a golden opportunity. So he leaves his drinking party and he goes and informs the Prophet. This is probably, there is some benefit, right? The Quran says. Maybe this is one of the small benefits. So he goes and he tells the Prophet ﷺ, check this out, that they're going to do this, maneuver. They're going to go another path around Medina to the Levant, etc. So the Prophet ﷺ, he sent Zayd to intercept, which he did, and this was a huge sort of victory again for the Muslims. But at this instance, with this military excursion, this was the Quraysh was now at a fork in the road. Either they attack the Prophet ﷺ, which they end up doing, which is what leads to the Battle of Uhud, or they make peace with it. I mean, at this point, there's no other way. They can't circumvent Medina. They can't not deal with the Prophet ﷺ. They cannot ignore Medina as a force, as a state. They cannot ignore the Prophet ﷺ as a person of military strength, etc. And this is exactly what leads to the Battle of Uhud, which we will talk about next time, inshaAllah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. I'm not endorsing drinking, by the way. I'm just saying that, there is some, the Quran says some manafa, so maybe this was one of them. But it is universally prohibited, just in case anyone thinks that I'm saying otherwise. Anybody have, sorry, I went a little over today, but there were so many things before the Battle of Uhud. Any questions or concerns? Brother Mohsin.
You mentioned that in Medina, some of the ladies did not wear the niqab.
Yes.
Can you explain what the dress code was?
Well, yes, some of the women didn't wear niqab. How do we know? Because in some of the hadith, the description is a woman who had red cheeks said such and such, like to Omar, or said such and such to the Prophet. Well, how do you know she had red cheeks? Well, obviously her face was not covered. And these are the type of evidences that the ulama use to establish that the niqab is a sunnah, not an obligatory part of the Muslim dress, Muslim women's dress. I don't have statistics, of course, of how many covered or not covered, but when we read about the women of Medina participating in the battles of the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, you can only imagine that's a pretty intense type of situation. So I would say probably maybe half, because the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, they covered, which was something special for them. And I could see many, probably wanted to emulate that. And that's how it comes into our books of fiqh. You'll read, it's very common to read in a classical book of fiqh that, a woman when she's out in the marketplace and this and that, she needs to cover everything except her hands and her feet, But when you dig into that, you realize that that's really a cultural interpretation, that that's not necessarily a fard, an obligation, that it's a sunnah. And in today's world, the way that the ulama understand it is that it is really a cultural, in some cultures it's completely normal. I mean, I know women that cover their face that don't wear hijab, meaning that when they leave their country, they don't even wear hijab. But covering your face, sometimes it's a way not to draw attention, sometimes it's a way not to get pulled over at a checkpoint, sometimes if you're going out to a wedding and you're all decked up, you don't want to show that, so you cover it. I've seen, because I know that it's not a sign of religiosity, it's just simply cultural. But the problem with the niqab, that the discussion sort of leads to another issue, is that if you are in a society or a culture in which the niqab is not normal, and then a woman starts wearing niqab, it can have the opposite effect. It can create a fitna. And religious dress or religious, religious dress and the like should not be used as a way to differentiate one's practice of religion. So I can't dress a certain way and make that and make an assumption that I'm more like pious than you, or you're more pious than me. So in communities in which the niqab is not normal, the ulama actually advise that a woman shouldn't wear niqab. And then the men say, oh, but brother, my wife is so beautiful and she's going to create fitna, and yeah, right, man. Okay, that's like, my wife is so beautiful too, right? But that's to me. That in the text, that means like the woman is so beautiful that if everyone saw her, they would pass out. Right? Have we met a woman in which we all passed out? I mean, come on, man. Be realistic. So that's the skinny on the niqab. The only caveat, or the only thing I would add to that about dress and religiosity, is that the ulama, they tend to dress a certain way as an indication that I'm the person you can ask the question of. And to highlight this story, our teachers taught us this, or narrate the story of Al-Izz ibn Abd salam, who was a great medieval Egyptian jurist. He is called Sultan al-Ulama. That's his title, the Sultan of all of the scholars. Al-Izz ibn Abd salam, he was on Hajj. And he was, wearing the garments for Hajj. And there was a man in his group that was making a mistake. So he told the man, you're making a mistake. And the man's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Leave me alone, Hajj, etc., etc. So like the next day, when they took off their clothes and Al-Izz ibn Abd salam put on his jurist garb, the man listened. He's like, i.e., you can ask me the question. But that's not like to say I'm more religious than you. That's something else. That's the only caveat to that. But that's the skinny on the niqab. Yeah.
Did non-Muslim women wear niqab at that time? Do you know?
Probably at times, yeah, because of the dust and the heat and traveling. And I mean, even the men would cover their face. Even till now, Bedouins will cover their face and when they travel and they walk. That's normal. Yeah.
Any historical or archaeological reference for the existence
tribes in Medina? I mean, currently, I'm talking about currently.
If there are Jews in Medina now,
No, any historical or archaeological evidence that
I don't know that much about it, but I think one of the problems with that question is the only thing we know about the Jews of Arabia really only come from Muslim sources. So there are sources. I don't know if there's that many other, there might be one or two. There are some ancient Jewish historians. They might have talked about that a little bit, but are a minor thing. For us, it's a major thing because this is the theater of what we're discussing. And the Jews of Persia and the Jews in the Roman Empire, they are much more significant because they are the ones that form, the Talmud and the real commentary on and produce Jewish authority. The Jews of Arabia, not so much. As a matter of fact, I don't even know if we know what happens to them after they leave. So that would need some investigation. But I would say very little information exists outside of Islamic sources. So we have a lot of sources. But to do a proper historical analysis of it, we'd have to look at some of those, I think Flavius, some of these other ancient authorities we could look into.
So within the Islamic history, so there is no reference like in any archaeological or just on history books only?
Archaeological, I'm not sure. I would doubt that. But I think people know where Banu Qaynuqa was and where